All right, so the time is now 11 o'clock a.m. in beautiful, sunny Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada here at Vendasta headquarters. Thank you so much for everyone for joining today's sales webinar. Really exciting day today. We have some special guests on the line from Yext. We're going to talk all about how to grow your business with Yext today. And just for joining today's webinar, each and every one of you has a chance to be randomly selected to get some free Yext products through Vendasta. So that's really exciting. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Rylan Morris. I'm the Manager of Sales Marketing here at Vendasta. My role essentially is to help our sales organization get the marketing collateral that they need. So there's some contact links. You can reach out to me. Email is kind of the best way if you have any questions. I'm not very active on LinkedIn. And yeah, let's just say email. If you ever want to reach out to myself, that's the best way to get a hold of me. And on the line here, it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest from Yext here, Rev. Oh man, I'm going to butcher your last name here, Rev. Rev Cianchio. Did I get it right there, Rev?
In the old world, they say Chancho, but my family here in America says Ciancio.
Ciancio, okay, perfect. Ciancio, okay. Thanks a lot, Rev. And we also have Jessica Downs, who's our the client training specialist at Yext as well. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So before we jump into things and hand things off to Yext here, or Yext guests here, I just want to remind everyone, a lot of you, this might be actually your first Vendasta webinar that you've ever joined, but just so you're aware, we actually host 2 webinars each and every single week. We have a sales webinar, which is what we're on right now, which is all 100% focused on helping you sell different sales strategies and tactics you can actually use in the field to hopefully boost your revenue. So that's every Wednesday at 11 our time. So at this time, every single Wednesday. And then we have every Thursday, the product webinars. And this is a really exciting thing to register for. It talks about all the different products and services you can get through Vendasta. It's more of a deep dive on how to use them, how to submit orders. And I'm excited to announce that tomorrow we actually have a product webinar all about our managed blog package that's available to all of our partners who have access to the marketplace. So definitely check that out and register for tomorrow's webinar. Just head over to vendasta.com/webinars. And definitely, if you want to register for next week's sales webinar as well, you can do that all from one spot now. Really exciting. So today's webinar, all about Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext. We introduced this, I think it was roughly 2 months ago. It's been a major hit with our partners. Being able to sell the power of Yext under your brand with your agency through Listing Sync Pro, a really, really exciting feature. I just want to break it down of the 2 different options you actually do have. For a lot of our partners, you might be on our current Listing Sync Pro product. You do want to upgrade to Yext. It's available for anyone that's selling to American businesses. You get the power of Yext integrated right within your platform. You can sell 100% white labeled. So just a little bit of a breakdown. If you're interested in selling Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext, contact your partner success manager. Or if you are a new partner, or if you just want to reach out to Vendasta and learn a little bit more about our partnership, call us at that toll-free number that you see there, 1-855-955-6650. So if you're watching from YouTube or wherever else, you can always just give us a call. We're typically only available during business hours, regular business hours, but you can always leave a message and we're going to get back to you first time that we can. So yeah, give us a call at any time. I also mentioned too, just for joining today's webinar, we're going to be drawing some random winners for some free Yext accounts. So one of your clients is luckily going to be able to benefit from the power of Yext through Listing Sync Pro. For free. You can just give it away if you like, or you can choose to sell it and make 100% markup on that, which is actually really, really fantastic. So the way it's going to work is that I have a list of attendees here. I'm going to be drawing at random here. So I have a little bit of a generator on my end. Basically, it's just going to pick out 3 random emails, and we're going to connect the accounts and make sure that it's the right person with the right account. You do have to stay for the duration of the webinar. So we want you to get the full effect of the presentation today. But yeah, stick around right till the end. We're going to be notifying you if you are a winner through your partner success manager. So they're going to be reaching out to you, or if you're a prospect, your business development representative or a sales development representative, they're going to be reaching out to you as well. So whoever the winner is will be contacting you directly by email, by phone call. then the discount is going to be applied to on the annual rate of how much it is for a full year's worth of Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext on the account of your choice once it's activated. So we'll work that out, the logistics, but basically you'll see a discount once it's been activated on your yearly invoice. And of course, this is only available, it's available for all of our partners, but Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext is only available to businesses selling to any American businesses. You do have to sell it to an American account or activate it for an account with an American address. With that said, I do want to jump right into the presentation. I just have a few little questions here. Looks good to go. So I'm just going to pass it right over to our guest from Yext here. So why don't you guys take it away? Let me just make you a presenter. And should be all good to go. So yeah, there we are. Perfect. Take it away, guys.
Cool. Thanks, Rylan. Hey, my name's Rev. Thanks, everybody, for joining the webinar today. It is an honor to be invited to talk with all of you. Just want to remind people that if you have questions as we go through the presentation today, just submit them through the chat. We'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation, or if they sort of make sense in the middle of the story, we'll sort of jump into that. Cool? I just asked you a question knowing you can't answer, so all good. All right. Like I said, my name is Rev Ciencio. I'm the Director of Partner Marketing here at Yext. My role is basically to provide marketing support to all of our great Yext partners and doing stuff like these webinars. I am a former Yext certified partner agency owner, meaning I did what you do now before I was here. I primarily work just in the hospitality space. I'm also a former New York City bar owner and an expert burger taster. You can Google that one if you like. So.
And my name is Jessica Downs. I'm the client training specialist here. And while I haven't owned any restaurants or run any agencies myself, I have worked with a lot of our partners over the past 2 years, kind of leveraging this resource and talking a lot about local search. So I'm definitely really excited to get you guys some information about that and make you super prepared to talk to your prospects as well.
Cool. Thanks, Jessica. Okay, so today, our agenda, we are going to talk about local search and how it works. We are going to talk about some features to leverage in the platform. We will talk about sales objections and how to get around them. And then we'll do something called the wrap up. And unfortunately, that does not involve a tortilla with food in it. So you'll have to wait till afterwards to have your lunch. Okay, so let's start with one of my favorite subjects, local search. And we're going to do this by telling a little bit of a story. So this is a bar in New York City called Macau Trading Company. They're known for their unique Eurasian cuisine. It's a mix of like Chinese, Portuguese influence. It's a really great place for cocktails. You can see they have a lot of liquor up there. And it's a really great place for intimate conversation. So it's sort of like a casual cocktail restaurant focused den, I guess. Anyway, so I'm kind of well known in the food space here in New York City, and I got invited there one night with a bunch of other Instagrammers. And the idea was they were going to serve us all these drinks and all these food, and they wanted us to take pictures of it and share it with our followers on Instagram. So we go through this like 10-course crazy meal with completely open bar, right? And so, you know, they're bringing out the chef, they're bringing out the culinary team, the cocktail program. And I start to do the math, right? I'm guessing they spent about $150 a person just to have us come in there and share our content with our followers on Instagram. If you do the math, that's basically a $3,000 tab to the business that they spent in one night to have, you know, basically get some marketing, right? So at one point I go up to the bar and I start talking to the publicist there, right? And she starts telling me all about their amazing cocktail program, and she introduces me to this guy, which is the head mixologist at Macau. He goes on for I don't know how long about their amazing cocktail list and where they source their bitters and the amount of studying they've done to think about all these cocktails and how much time they put into these cocktail recipes. I'm like, okay, I get it. It is a cocktail bar. I understand. Now it's slightly lost on me because I'm a whiskey neat guy, but it was interesting to hear that, like, I get it. Your thing is you're a cocktail bar, right? So he hands me this cocktail menu and says, you know, what would you like? It's absolutely massive. I'm like Gideon's Bible of cocktails, right? I flipped through a few pages and I just ended up entering a bourbon neat. And I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, so you're a cocktail bar, right? I reach into my pocket and I pull out my iPhone, right? and I do a quick search, right? Best cocktail bar near, or best cocktail bar in Tribeca, which is the neighborhood in New York City where this bar is located, right? The results are exactly as I expected, right? They don't even show up in the Google 3-pack. I'm assuming you guys have all seen a Google 3-pack before. If you haven't, that's what it looks like. Now keep in mind, as I do this search, my phone knows that I am inside Macau Trading Company, and it knows that I have just searched for best cocktail bar in Tribeca. Like, my phone's not dumb, it's much smarter than I am, right? So I expect it to give me the result of Macau Trading Company, right? I lean over to the publicist and I'm like, okay, pull out your phone, and I actually have her go through the same action, right? She gets the same results as I do, right? And so you look, right? I ask her to expand to the full list. You see where it says above weather up 4.0 rating? When you tell Google best, or you use the word best in a search query, you are telling them that you want something over a 4.0 rating. You don't want a 3 or 3.5 or 2, you want 4, right? So I say to the publicist, hey, let's just do an experiment. Let's remove the 4.0, let's remove best, okay? And expand, all right, sorry, before we get to that, I asked her to expand the list to say, let's look at the top 20, right? Macau is still not in this list. Again, my phone knows where I am. I then ask her to take off the 4.0 rating. Let's just see let's forget about best. Let's just look for a cocktail bar near me, right? Guess what? It's still not in there. The point being that this bar and this restaurant, if you don't search for them by their name, you're never going to find it, right? And this place has great food. It has great cocktails. It is a really great place to go. If you are searching for this, you're never going to find it, because their information is scattered and incorrect across all the publisher networks like Google, Facebook, Bing, Yahoo, right? And so really, this is just one story about the importance of local search. And even though it's about a bar restaurant, it could really apply to any locally based business. And so with that, now that we've sort of seen how bad search can be, I'm going to pass the Mike Beastie Boy style over to Jessica, and she's going to give you a 30,000-foot view of how local search works. So this will help you when you're explaining, what you do and what problems you can help with potential customers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's a great story to drive down to a specific scenario. But what we're looking at here is that location search actually is exploding in general. So searching for best cocktail in Tribeca, that's not something that's outside of the norm. And what we're seeing here is that not only are we looking in our actual area, we're doing these near me searches. I know my friends and I do this all the time when we're in New York City. We're like, we're going to find the best brunch spot near me, because we don't want to spend more than $10 on that Uber to get there. And with that being said, what you'll find is that most people that are doing this location search are actually going to go to that business within a day. If you think about the last time that you went to search for that restaurant, or you were trying to find the next doctor you were going to go to, or whatever the case may be, it was probably because you were anticipating going there or buying that product within the next day or so. And so with that being said, when people are actually doing these searches, it actually results in a purchase. So especially in the instance that Rev was just talking about, people that are searching for that best cocktail place in Tribeca, it was because they were probably going to go buy a cocktail in Tribeca. So with that being said, you want to make sure that you're actually there and showing up, because of the money that you can garner from just showing up in search.
Right, so just to color on top of that for a second, right? So when you're speaking to a prospect and they tell you like, well, how important is search? Well, I mean, there you have it, right? Search is about intent. If 3 out of 4 searches result in a purchase, like within a day, I would say that's pretty important. And you can use that when you're talking to prospects and customers.
100%. And especially because they might come back and say, well, I have this really great website, and my website has all this information about me, and I do a lot to market my website, and and that's where I'm at. But what we want to kind of turn the conversation into is that's kind of search in the past. If you think about it, your website is obviously really important, and that is where all the main information about your business is going to exist. But what we're seeing in the transition to search today is that typically what people are going to see first is that Google page, or your Facebook listing, your Yelp listing, Apple. There's actually hundreds of places that people can actually reference when it comes to looking at your business. And what we're finding is that is getting around 2 to 5 times more views. And I know Rev sees this all the time in the restaurant business. It actually can be exorbitantly higher. for the amount that you're going to see when it comes to these local listings.
Yeah, if you're working with a restaurant customer or talking to a restaurant customer, they're actually 10 times more likely to be seen on these sites than they are their own site. And oftentimes, specifically in the hospitality vertical, a lot of people don't even get to the restaurant's website. They just go to Google or Yelp, and then that's all they need to know.
Exactly. And another thing worth noting is that it's not always just these big publishers. It's not just Google or just Facebook or just Yelp. It's a lot of other publishers that work within this network too. You know, with that example about Yesabe.
Yeah, so you think about all these websites, and just to use an example of the importance of like sites you've never heard of, or maybe your prospects have never heard of. Yesabe.com is a site that caters to the Spanish-speaking population, right? And so you're like, okay, how important is that? Well, 15% of all the searches in America are in Spanish, right? So if you ask a customer, like, is 15%, additional customers in your business significant? Well, it is. Well, in that case, Yesabe is pretty important then, because you're missing out on 15% of the population. Since every customer matters, you want to make sure that every experience that somebody has with your brand or with your prospect's brand, that is the best it can be.
Inevitably in these conversations, though, that you'll hear, it's, well, that's great, but when am I going to be #1 on Google? When am I going to be able to take over the best cocktail in Tribeca list of that local pack? And what we want to do is kind of take note of, well, what is Google really taking into consideration when it ranks these local businesses? And what we're seeing here is that these are the 3 primary things: relevance, distance, prominence. And I always ask people, take a step back and think about why that might be. It's because if you were doing a search for yourself to find this restaurant or to find this location, these are the 3 things that you're taking into consideration when choosing a business too. You want it to be relevant, you want it to serve the food that you're going to eat, you want it to be close, like I was saying, you don't want to travel far to go to this location, and you also want it to be well reviewed. So Google knows that this is what the searchers are looking for when it actually comes to choosing businesses or buying products. And so it's not altogether too surprising that these are also the 3 things they take into consideration when it comes to ranking these local businesses. And additionally, how search looks is also different. So if you think about what search was like in the past, you would get these 10 blue links and it would give you the data technically that you were looking for, but you would have to sift through it yourself. You'd have to click into the website, you'd have to find the information that you were looking for. But in today's era of search, it's really all about structured answers. These search engines want to come back and give you the answers at your fingertips because it knows what you're looking for. It knows you're looking to call the location or drive to the location. So in a world of structured answers, we also want to start thinking about how are we going to structure data to provide these search engines. And inevitably, we want to think about search in the future, because this is obviously something that's really important for us right now and what Rev was talking about within Google and all these other publishers that are in the network. But we also want to be well prepared for what can we do to be ready for where search is going in the future. Because if you think about these advanced services that are coming, like self-driving cars and drones, you need to have structured data, and it needs to be presented equally across all these different platforms. And you need to be in control of it, because if you have a self-driving car that has your location from 3 years ago in it, people aren't going to get to your location, and they're going to find someplace else to go instead.
Right. So if you think about search in the future, even search today with these voice-activated devices like an Echo or a Siri, right? What does search look like? Well, it doesn't look like anything. It sounds like one answer. So if you're like, hey Siri, I need to buy a hammer, or where's the best hardware store near me? You're not going to get 10 blue links. You're not going to get a knowledge card. You're going to get one answer, right? And so if you have a business or a customer and their data is not optimized for that type of search, they're never going to come up as that one audio answer, right?
Exactly. And especially when we look at search today and the actual issues that are presented to these businesses that you're talking to, these are just a few statistics that speak to the core information that we would just expect to be correct for a business, right? When you're looking for something, you expect that it's the correct name, you expect that it's the correct phone number, but what we're finding in reality is that a lot of this information is wildly inaccurate, and it leads to this idea of what can we do to control it, fix it, and maintain it moving forward. And especially because if we think about the obstacles that we're facing to overcome those issues, we have those inaccurate listings for businesses. We've all had that happen where you go to the location and you're like, Why isn't it open? You realize that their hours were listed long on the page. You could be completely missing in search, and then like Rev was saying, you're not going to show up in that result at all if you're not listed in that directory. Or you could just not be standing out. So if you think about it, you can have the correct name, address, and phone number for yourself, but what are you doing to differentiate yourself against your competitor? What are you doing to build your brand? And that's where it comes into figuring out, well, how can we overcome these obstacles? And the three that we have out there, taking control, driving more traffic, building your brand, all very important, but the one that I always focus on throughout this presentation and while talking to partners is control. You want to have those direct connections to these different brands and to these different publishers so that you can ultimately drive more traffic and build the brand. And why that is because if you think about your brand, you think about your business, you should also think about all the complex facts about your business and all of your consumers that have diverse experiences. A lot of times people will be like, well, my business isn't too complicated. I've been in the same location for the past 30 years, and I don't really know what really is that complex about me. But what we have to do is explain, well, there's your hours on Monday, there's your hours on Tuesday, there's the services you provide. And then you also have to think about your consumers that have diverse experiences. So for instance, my manager refuses to use Yelp as a search engine when it comes to restaurants, refuses. She only uses Foursquare. So as many of you know, you can probably spend a lot of money leveraging yourself on Yelp as a business. But if you've never created that free Foursquare account and controlled your information on Foursquare, my manager's probably not going to find you as a restaurant. So what we want to do is start thinking about how can we have those direct connections to all the places our consumers might see us, and also be prepared for the people that are out there that use multiple sources to consult information. I might start with Google, but I'll check them out on Foursquare. I'll make sure that their information is the same on Yelp. And those are the types of people that we want to start thinking about too. And that's why when we have this knowledge engine, when we have, the Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext, that's really what we're getting down to the core of. Having that firm control over all the information that might be out there for your business, not just name, address, and phone number, but also really paying attention to things like content outside of just the name, address, and phone number that helps build your brand. And so with that being said, there's a couple of really important features that you can leverage in a conversation when talking about Listing Sync Pro, powered by Yext. Because at the core of what the technology does is this match and lock technology. And one of the best things that I try to do throughout this presentation, and especially when I'm talking to small business owners, is how can I talk about this in a way that's relatable and makes sense? So match and lock is what's happening. We're matching to these different listings and we're locking down the information so that it's protected from other sources that might come in and update that information. One popular example being suggested edits. One of the things you might have noticed on some of the screenshots that Rev had is there's a suggest and edit button on every Google listing for a business. And users can go in and suggest those edits very quickly and pretty easily. So we want to make sure we protect against it, and hence why I tend to call this an insurance policy. I'll tell people, you insure a lot of things that you care about. You insure your health, your house. My mom insures our dog, because she loves our dog probably more than me. And what we are just saying is we want to insure your business and how it's presented online, because as we saw, it has a huge impact in the sales that happen for your business.
So quick story on that. When I was a Yext certified partner doing what you guys do, I had a prospect who was pretty much on the dotted line as to whether they were going to work with me or not for this power listing. And I said, somebody could go in and change your Google My Business profile today. And they were like, well, what matter would, why would I care? How would that affect me? And I was like, I'll show you. And I went into my Google profile, I looked up their business, and I changed them from a tapas restaurant and suggested them as a vegan restaurant. And they were like, whatever, I control that profile, it'll never happen. And about an hour later, I got a notification telling me they had been changed to a vegan restaurant. Not the owner of the business, me, just the user who had changed that. I then forwarded that email to the prospect and was like, do you believe me now? They signed on as a customer. I don't necessarily suggest you use that, but from an anecdotal standpoint, that is the serious nature at which it is to take control of these things.
And hence the protection. And another great thing about leveraging it as an insurance policy, or kind of like using a similar terminology, is it sets it up to be a long-term solution, so that you can have that retention model built in to offering it. Another great feature to leverage within this is the real-time updates, because like we talked about, when we have those direct connections and we have that firm control over the information, it becomes easy to update your information in real time. And like I mentioned before, people might not think about this, but their business is constantly changing and evolving. They might change their hours because they hired someone else and they had the ability to extend their hours. They might add new services. They might have a business description that's geared towards their winter months versus their summer months, and want to include keywords that are important for those types of instances. So what we want to do is not only keep your content fresh, but we also want to keep your customers informed, because as things change about your business, you want to be able to keep your customers equally as updated. And coupled with that is this idea of being able to update once, update everywhere. So you have this really broad network of tons of different places where we're pushing out your information. And we'll talk a lot throughout the rest of this presentation through our objection section, the value of having such a deep network and kind of how that can really help your business. But knowing that it is as simple as coming into one centralized place to update your information and knowing it's going to consistently push out to all the different sites. And one tidbit that I thought was particularly interesting is that this also applies to in-car navigation systems. So a lot of times, I know that this happens to me all the time. I'll get into my mom's car and I'll type in one of those points of interest, and it will not even be remotely close to where the place is actually located. And it's because a lot of these publishers that power the information for these in-car navigations, they might be smaller ones that you haven't thought about before. But knowing that your information has to be correct everywhere for all the people that are driving to your location is critical. And so with that, we dive into the objections, because we can set a really great story and we can talk a lot about the value of online presence. But at the end of the day, being faced with objections is kind of a reality. And how can we best overcome those and use those objections to our advantage to spin the conversation in a way that makes sense for them? So one of the first primary objections that we tend to come across is the blanket statement that I'm just going to push you off and say, I don't need this, or I don't need this right now. I find this a lot when it's people that we talked about before, which is, you know, my business has been the same for 30 years. Like, why do I need to do this now? So what we try to do is reframe the conversation a bit. We say, well, don't think about how you're listed online for a second. Just think if you were one of these businesses instead. You're the Dynasty Buffet and you walk up to the front door of your restaurant and it says the Nasty Buffet. Are you really going to leave it that way? I look at the sign for the Dynasty Buffet and it looks like it's probably been the same sign that they've had for the past 20 to 30 years as well. Doesn't look like they've done much revolutionary work to it. But now that it's broken, it's probably a good bet that they're going to fix it. The same with these other locations as well. So what we want to do is flip the conversation and say, well, how you're listed online is as foundational as that business sign outside of your front door. So if you think about it, more and more people are looking down at their phone. More of those people are doing the best cocktails in Tribeca searches than they are actually walking around Tribeca with their head up in the air trying to find a location to go to. So we really just want to talk about if it's broken, fix it. And then also talking about the idea of lost sales. Kind of like what we were talking about before, that same 76% of people who use location search buy within a business day. But what we're seeing on the other side is that nearly half of these businesses across the US have something wrong or missing about their address online. So how much money are you willing to leak out just because of inaccurate data that's on these different publishers? So the best way to really overcome this objection of I don't need this is creating that sense of urgency around it in the first place. Being like, well, yes, you do. You probably just haven't thought about it in the way that we need you to think about it. The other big objection that tends to come with this product or kind of like using Yext in general is, well, I only care about Google. And I'm willing to bet if I were to take a survey of the people that are attended here right now, there'd be a lot of you that said the same thing. I only care about what Google has to say for my clients. I manage their Google My Business page and it looks great. And I can't argue with that. I'm definitely the person that when they get a new iPhone, I delete Safari and I download Google Chrome on my phone. So what we want to do is frame the conversation in a way that says, if you do only care about Google, why should you also then care about all the other publishers that are in this network? And one of the analogies that we use to really cover that is we say, well, think about if you were trying to find a restaurant. And instead of consulting your phone, you actually did it old school. You consulted 10 of your friends. And you said, hey, where is this one pizza restaurant located? And every single person tells you exactly the same answer. Goodfellas Pizzeria, it's on 144 Orchard Street. This is their phone number. That high confidence is what's going to actually get you to the front door. Because you're probably not going to go to that same restaurant in the same location with the same phone number if when you ask those 10 people, they give you these responses instead. They say, yeah, I think it's Goodfellas Pizzeria, but then someone else says, no, I actually have never heard of it before. Some people are giving you an address that seems way outdated. That low confidence is what prevents you from going to the location. And it's the same thing if you only care about Google. Right, so what we want to do is find our way to actually build the confidence that Google has in your information, because what we're seeing is that the stronger that network is, the more likely that people can verify and validate your information across these different publishers, the higher the authority is. And that's what's really going to help when it comes to Google. So for that person that does say they only care about Google, telling them that the depth of this network is what's going to help build the confidence in the rest of their information.
Yeah, so to that point, 1 out of every 3 searches on the internet is not on Google. So, you know, as a client or a prospect you're speaking to, you could ask them, are you willing to just forget about 33% of the population? Hopefully the answer is, well, we care about that.
Right, so it's really just thinking about all those different places, but then like we talked about before, thinking about all the different consumers that you're interacting with, because no one consumer is the same, and we want to make sure that even though that's true, the information that they receive is the same. So just overcoming that objection by talking about the value of this network itself. Another objection that tends to come, and maybe not so much an objection as it is a concern that people have. They're like, well, you're talking a lot about controlling my information. So I'm afraid I'm going to cancel and you're going to completely revert the information that I have, or you're going to delete information that I had where I didn't have it before. And so what we want to do is talk about, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going out and reverting this information back or doing anything to your actual listing itself. What we want you to do is take a step back and think about, well, what got us here in the first place, right? So there's a reason you wanted to use this particular solution. You wanted to update inaccurate information about your business, because what we found is a business that doesn't have any sort of solution or control over their information saw around 61 core changes per year to their information. That's the name, address, and phone number. Or, you know, and there's tons of different ways that this information can get updated. It could be Rev going out and suggesting category changes to your Google page, or it could just be the fact that when you have all this world of information, it can easily be transferred and disrupted across these different sites. So if you think about your business listing, and then you change owners, or you move, there's tons of different data sources out there that are working to collect and compile this information to update their sources. And one of the things I always try to bring to people's attention here is that when you're moving your business, the last thing you're thinking about is what your address is listed as on ToFindLocal. ToFindLocal is one of the publishers in our networks, for those of you who that was the first time they've ever heard that word before. And that speaks to the idea of, yes, you're moving your business, you're thinking about the movers, you're thinking about your tax forms, you're not thinking about ToFindLocal. But the problem is now that information exists out there for all these other data sources to pick up on and use to update your information if you're not the one that's in direct control of it. So they can take hold of things like a social post or old data or state tax forms that have your information. One example of this, people always tend to be like, well, what do you mean by social post? I was training a person, he did iron welding, and he had a Facebook page and it was great. But what he didn't know is when he moved, there was people that had checked into his location on Facebook and created an unofficial Facebook page for him. And when he was trying to update his address on Instagram, he found out that he couldn't. And what turned out to be the case was that once he claimed that unofficial Facebook page and he updated the address, that's what caused the information to change within Instagram. So the idea is that while you might not have direct control of every single publisher that might be out there, it might be what sources the information for other publishers that you might need to work with. So this idea that you want to make sure that you're in control of as much of your information and as many places as possible, because it can disrupt the type of content that's out there. And what we've seen is we actually ran a scan for a business over the course of a year, and it's getting a little cut off here in the image, but it's turning from a hometown deli to hometown liquor store. And the phone number there keeps changing. And that's on a few of the publishers that are within our network. And what that's showing is that because that deli didn't have control of their information, and because that location probably at one point was a liquor store and no longer is, that content was coming back and constantly making those changes on just a few of the publishers in our network. So to go back and answer the original question of what happens if I cancel, the answer is really that we're removing that protective wall or canceling that insurance policy that I was referencing before. So when you wake up the next day, you might not notice that your information has changed at all, but slowly over time, because as we saw, there's so many competing data sources out there fighting to update information, that content can slowly change without the direct connections and control we were talking about before. One analogy that I find always works in this situation is referring back to it as landscaping. So if you pay someone to maintain your lawn and you cancel, you don't wake up the next day in a jungle. There's not 6 feet of grass, there's not weeds everywhere. But slowly over the next couple of weeks, because it's not a priority for you to mow your lawn or to weed the yard or anything like that, it slowly starts to get longer. The weeds slowly start to grow back. And you're not going to call up the landscaper and say, why did you do this to me? You're just going to realize that you paid for a service and you no longer paid for the service, and the natural order of things is what causes problems to come back. So just kind of referring to people when they're nervous about what happens if you cancel, just knowing that it's really about the direct connections and control that we have and the protection that really can be provided. The last objection that we tend to see is well, I can't afford this right now, which is usually coupled with I'm spending too much money on marketing already. So what we try to do in this situation is ask, and I think that's the best thing about this solution in general is that it lends itself to just asking tons of open-ended questions. We can say, well, what are you currently spending those marketing dollars on? Is it a billboard or a radio ad, PPC campaigns? Whatever the case may be, we want to make sure that we're preventing the leaky budget. One example of this is I grew up on Long Island, and diners are really popular. And they have these placemats that you can get, and all the local businesses pay an exorbitant amount of money to have their advertisement on this placemat that I will inevitably put my coffee on. And what happens, though, is that you can pay that exorbitant amount of money to be on the placemat with my coffee, but if I go to search for you later and I can't find you, that money that you spent is actively being leaked because it did not get the goal that you were set out to accomplish. It didn't get me to your front door. It didn't get me to your hair salon. It didn't get me to get my dog groomed by you. And so what we really are talking about here is that you want to be wise about the money that you spend when it comes to your marketing dollars.
And so just to go back to the story we started with, right? So that restaurant spent $3,000 to have us come in and eat food and share it on all our social profiles when they could have spent $25 with you to fix that problem, right? Like, where should you be spending your money? And even if they do spend that $3,000 on an influencer event or a billboard or whatever it is, if they're not searchable, it was really like flushing money down the toilet.
Yeah. And exactly why we call this, building the foundation, because whether you're doing one of these things, you're doing all of these things, and especially you guys, as partners through Vendasta, is that you have so many other things that you can be offering your clients. Using this as a really foundational piece to build their organic searchability, because you can have a really great website and you can have a lot of really great content, but if it's not being leveraged and pushed out across this really deep network, it's not getting its full value. So really just talking about this as a foundational piece. In the world of analogies, this is kind of like setting the cement foundation for all the other contractors that might come in and build this house. They'll all need that strong foundation first to do anything else. So answering those objections and, other than these objections that we covered, what kind of, obstacles or objections do we see when we're selling this product? It really just comes down to people not understanding how much this information can be inaccurate. So it's really the big struggle there is, explaining to people that there is a lot of inaccurate data out there and it does matter where it is. And then to kind of wrap up here, one of the things that I want to tie back to is this idea of bundling this in with those other services that you provide. So, Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext is one solution of many that you can offer, and that's great in our eyes because when we see partners actually package this, they can see that increase in retention up to like 30%. So it is a way to kind of make yourself really sticky within these clients that you're working with. So definitely leveraging it in a bundled way.
Yeah, and one of those things too, like in terms of services you could offer a client, right? The thing with Yext is once you've turned on Yext for a location and you put their information in and submit it, you're going to see results within 72 hours. I don't know how many other marketing platforms are out there that you can prove, ROI to a client or customer that quickly, right? It just does. Like, I don't even care if you're renting a plane and doing like Eat at Joe's 50% off smoke signal lower city, like it's not going to work that quickly. So, in terms of an ROI, it's great to be able to do something like this and within days go, hey, we've submitted to this many sites, this much of your information is correct. We've updated these many listings. And so from an agency perspective, it's great to be able to prove ROI literally out of the gate.
Definitely. And when we're thinking best practices in general when it comes to talking about this solution, so if you're going to incorporate this in a sales conversation that you're having with a prospect, these are kind of the three things we think are really important to keep in mind when actually pitching it. So first and foremost, avoiding information overload, which might sound crazy after going through this 40-minute webinar with us where we overloaded you with a lot of information. But I promise it's just so that you're well prepared to answer those objections that are a little bit inevitable when it comes to this solution. But when you're talking to someone, if you can tailor the conversation by sticking to the core of the importance of online presence, knowing that their online presence, like Rev was talking about with his first example, is kind of critical. And then lastly, using their objections as opportunities. Because if someone's out there saying as an objection, well, I only care about Google, that's great for you. You can go in and start talking about how deep this network is and how you're going to build confidence in Google with the information that you're providing for that client, while avoiding other types of topics that might not really be relevant or might just cause more conversations to be had that are unnecessary. So really just sticking to these three core things when talking about this solution. And then this objection summary. So these are kind of 4 of the objections that we most strongly see when it comes to selling this solution. And a lot of other objections that you might hear really do funnel up to these main objections, I would say. So kind of using this as your guideline of what really can be done with this particular solution. And then we will leave it for any questions. So if anyone has any questions for us that you wanted to type in or anything like that, what I can do is I can pass the presenter role back over to Rylan and he can read through any of those questions and go over those with you. So I'll go ahead and pass that presenter role right back over.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. That was absolutely fantastic. And what's great is we actually do have quite a few questions here, and I've been kind of plugging away and answering a lot of them. But I do have a few that I want to just surface in front of the whole audience here, just so that, I think they're good questions that could be answered in front of everyone. So my first question here, and maybe you can help us out here, Jessica or Rev. The first question comes from Nadine, and she actually has 2 questions, but the first one here is, can this help a business like mine, which focuses on SEO services, that has a potential client base nationwide? If so, how? So how would you answer that?
So the question is, how can it help with SEO?
Yeah, so her business sounds like they're very focused on SEO services, and she has a client base that's nationwide. So I believe from the sounds of it, it's like a chain or maybe something that wouldn't just have a singular location.
Got it. Well, so I mean, the real power of the platform is a location by location ability to update that information. But from a branding perspective, like some of those things, like category or maybe some brand photos, things that are going to apply to all of the locations, are things you can manage in there. And initially when the Yext platform was designed, it was designed to be an SEO tool. It has morphed into a branding tool and a brand knowledge tool, but at the core base of it, its superpower is SEO.
Excellent. And there's also a part two to this question, and it might actually help flesh things out a little bit here. But the part two is, can this be helpful to businesses that are classified by Google to be a brand because they do not have a physical location, but they do want to do business locally and statewide? So an example here she gave is a patent lawyer, like a California patent lawyer.
Well, so that lawyer has an office, right? All right, and that lawyer probably has consultations, and that lawyer probably has people come into their office. So ultimately, the answer is yes. If the service that they provide is applicable to people who aren't necessarily in their service area, right? They're still going to be optimized for those things that are important to their business. Like, let's say they specialize in divorce law or they specialize in criminal law. Those are the types of information points and data that you're going to be able to put into the Yext knowledge engine and have that optimized for search.
Excellent. Thanks, Rev. I have another question here from Jamie, and I can answer this question for you here, Jamie. He wants us to address, he's a little worried that Yext might sell directly to his clients using the Yext system. The agreement that we have with Yext actually will prevent Yext from chasing after your clients. So we have, our partnership is a true partnership, and you're a part of that with Yext here. So you don't have to worry about, if you do decide to start selling Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext getting the information about your clients and then chasing after them. So it's definitely not something that's going to happen there. I have a question from Scott here as well about selling to B2B clients. And I think maybe that was more or less answered from the previous question there with Nadine Scott. But I don't know, is there anything else you would like to add maybe to that, Rev, or Jessica about selling to B2B clients? He makes a comment here how it works so great for B2C, but if there's some sales pitches that they can use for selling to B2B type businesses?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always tend to talk about in those situations is that businesses that serve primarily B2B, there is a lot to their brand that they spend typically a lot of money on. That's what I would see a lot with these businesses, is that they are trying to market to these businesses in a way that brand is really powerful. So being able to have firm control over how that brand is displayed across all these different publishers is really important. And there is, a lot of location based to it. You want to really build that strong local foundation and get yourself organically presented, because at the end of the day, it's only going to be really helpful to have that strong foundation in the first place. So I always talk about brand control and then building a foundation when talking to B2B.
Excellent. Thanks, Jessica. Question here from Brian. This actually has to do with your story earlier there, Rev, about the near me functionality with Google. So his question is, when you do a near me search on Google, what is the default search radius? I don't know if you guys have any insight to that, if it's like a calculation that Google goes by.
So I'm not a Google expert, but it does have a tendency to change based on where you are. So if you're searching in New York City, which is a heavily populated urban area, typically you're going to get a smaller radius. Whereas if you're out in the middle of Montana or Saskatchewan, it might be up to a half mile to a mile.
It also does depend on the platform sometimes too. So whether you're doing it desktop versus mobile. So if you do it on a desktop, it's going to probably show you a little bit of a wider range. Whereas when you're on your mobile device, it's usually a bit of a closer range. So where you're located as well as the device that you're using.
Awesome. I think that story is so great that you told there earlier, Rev, where it's that could be your sales tactic, is when you go and approach a business, just search for what they're known for and see if it shows up as a business nearby, right? I think that's an absolutely fabulous way to approach things. I have a
I
question.
mean, when I was a Yext certified partner, when I was doing, you know, what you guys do, there was not a sales conversation I had that didn't involve that. That, like, at some point we didn't search for their business or search their category and show how incorrect or how they didn't come up in search. And here's another thing: if they did come up in search, let's say I was talking to a prospect and I did, you know, best hardware store near me, and they did come up in the pack. Where I would go in my sales pitch from there was like, how do you manage this, right? And typically the answer was, oh, well, I update this one in Foursquare, but there's no way they're updating all of them. So the pitch then is not, you need to correct it. It becomes a time-saving thing, right? So, hey, let me save you time and money by having, you know, this one-click solution.
Absolutely. That's so great. Neil here has a question. I can answer this question here for you, Neil. Is it Neil? Yeah, I think it's Neil. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading it as Nell here. But the question is, if the listing is not found or has possible errors in the listing portion of the review platform, will this update all those without having to manually log in and claim those listings? And the answer to that is yes. With a little asterisk next to that as well, because I do want to make just a distinction here on what Neil is actually asking. So Neil is referring to, in our reputation management product at Vendasta, we do have a listings management dashboard that is kind of separate from where the Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext lives. And there are some listings that have some overlap. So there are some listings that are Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext will go in and correct, and then that information will be corrected in the listings dashboard within reputation management. But we also do monitor additional sources that aren't corrected automatically through Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext. And if you have any questions about which sources are monitored and corrected, you can always reach out to your partner success manager that can get you that information. But the answer is yes. So any of the sources that Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext will go in and correct. You don't actually need to go in, and if the listing is not found in the first place, Yext will actually go in and create that listing, or Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext will go in and create that listing. And of course, that'll be monitored by the reputation management product in the listings dashboard, and you should see that correct information show up there. So I hope that answers your question there, Neil. Great. So I'm just going to go through here and see if there's any additional questions. We do have quite a few today, and we are kind of just at the end of wrapping up the webinar here. So if you do have any additional questions, guys, be sure you get them in that question box. And if I don't answer them live in person here, or we don't answer them through the chat here, we're going to reach out to you after the call here and make sure that you get those questions answered. Let me just see here. Just have a couple of other questions. A few questions about B2B as well. I hopefully those were answered earlier by Jessica. I have a question here from Rob. So will listings carry the Power Listings brand when using Listing Sync Pro? Will Listing Sync Pro version of Yext be the same as Yext Direct? So the way it works, Rob, is that when you go in and activate Listing Sync Pro powered by Yext, the dashboard that your client would log into to see any changes that have happened to their listings will be that Listing Sync Pro dashboard. And it will have your agency's branding on it, and the call to action is all going to be connecting to your company, your agency, your salespeople. However, it's not the same with every single listing, but there are some sources out there that do say, if you go to that source direct, it will say that the listing was corrected by Yext, or has corrected by Yext Power Listings. So it's not the same with every single listing source. Not every single listing has that information branded on them. But just so you're aware, just so we're not, telling you it's 100% white label, there are some things where some sources, if you go to them directly, if your client would go to that particular source, it does occasionally say corrected by Yext. It's not the same with every single listing, no. And there's a lot of questions here, just in general, about where can I access this presentation after the call. I guess this is an absolutely fantastic presentation. We're getting a ton of positive feedback here. So this is really, really great. Really happy about that. I'm glad everyone found it super valuable. Just so everyone knows, you can access all of our recordings for previous webinars, plus the presentation that we use on the webinar in our resource center. So if you head over to support.vendasta.com, if you head over to training videos, you'll be able to find just the archive of our sales webinars and our product webinars, and you can go in, watch them. They're also on YouTube. The link to the recording will be on YouTube after the call here. It does take us a little while to get everything updated, and of course, it will take us a little bit to just export the webinar, get it on YouTube, and that sort of thing. So do just keep an eye out for it. You can subscribe to any of our resource center articles, so you'll get an update instantly that it gets posted. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, thank you so much for everyone that's joined and found this super, super valuable. So you know what? I think we're gonna end it up there. So thank you once again for everyone for joining us. Rev, Jessica, it's an absolute pleasure getting you guys on the call here. Thank you so much for hosting today's webinar. It's been an absolute blast having you on the call here. Hopefully we can do more of this in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Again, we're going to have it all, the recording for this all available in our resource center after the call here. And for anyone that didn't get their answers, their questions answered here, we're going to be reaching out to you after the call. And hopefully we'll be reaching out to you with some good news as well with free Yext accounts. So just to recap here, we're going to be randomly selecting 3 attendees to the webinar who have watched the entire thing, who have stayed right until the end. We do have that information. So any of you guys that are currently on the call right now, you'll be entered to win one of these free Yext accounts. So hopefully we're reaching out to you with that good information in a bit here. But I guess that's it for now. Definitely check out vendasta.com/webinars to register for tomorrow's webinar, all about our new blog package service that's available for you to sell. Another thing you can hopefully drive some additional revenue from. And again, every single week, the same time, same place here, Wednesdays at 11 o'clock our time here at Vendasta headquarters. You can check out our sales webinars with more great tactics on how to sell to local businesses. So once again, thanks for everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks again. Take care.